Hello everyone. So in this video I'm going to go over everything I did in the United Kingdom that I can remember and give you guys a mini review of it. Tell you a bit what it is, what my experience was there, would I recommend it, would I not recommend it, what kind of person is it for. So we're going to have a little, I guess you could say, marathon here, and we're going to go through the different cities, etc. So this could get a bit long. So, firstly, we have London, and London's divided up into a couple different areas because London was huge, and I was there, I think, 4 days because there's so much stuff I wanted to see when I was there. And I gave London a 10 out of 10. It lived up to it actually exceeded my expectations. It's an incredible city. Just seeing all the landmarks, be it Piccadilly Circus or Nelson's Column or Harrods or Hyde Park or number 10 Downing Street or Westminster. There's just so many amazing things to see there. So let's just start going through them. Overall, London 10 out of 10, I'd recommend. National Gallery. So it's a bit like Washington D.C. in that some museums are owned by the government, or at least by some sort of national trust. So the Science Museum, the National Gallery, the Albert and Victoria Museum, the British Museum, and a couple others are owned by the government, and they're technically free. Imperial War Museum, that was the other one. They're technically free to go into. They ask you to make a donation, which I did because it was normally only £3 to £5, and I don't know. I'm high trust. It's much cheaper than the paid attractions, and it's for a good cause. So the National Gallery is the art museum. Now, I admit I might just be a little jaded when it comes to art museums because I've seen so many. I've seen the Louvre. I've seen the all three of the museums in Madrid. I forget what they're all called. I think the Prada. There's a whole bunch there. I've seen a whole bunch in Italy. I've seen a whole bunch in Philadelphia, Denver, Vienna. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I've seen a lot, and this one didn't really stand out. But for free, it was good. They had a lot of interesting paintings there, and they had a lot of Rembrandts, and I really like Rembrandt, so I'd recommend going there. It's free. If you don't like it, you can just go walk around for half an hour and leave. If the kind of paintings there are your style, then go ahead. Nothing in London's very far apart from anything else, so that's right near like Nelson's Column and that whole. I don't know if you want to call it the Capital District or whatever. The Science Museum was pretty interesting. Once again, free museum. I donated £3. What's kind of cool actually is because everything in the UK is contactless. It's like contactless debit and credit. You could just tap your card against the donation button and it'll debit your account for £3, which is nice because then you don't have to worry about fumbling with change and do you have £3 or do you only have 20s, etc. So the Science Museum was cool. When I was there, they had a huge exhibit on Watt and the steam machine, and they kind of had all these like early steam machines. They went through how it was discovered, how it was used. They had stuff about the space program. They had uh, kind of an okay exhibit on biology and genetics, and it wasn't a bad science museum. Not very large compared to what I'm used to in some other cities I've been to, like in Philadelphia, but once again, not bad. It's kind of in a out of the way part of the city, but it's right next to the Victoria and Albert Museum and the Natural History Museum, all of which are free. The Natural History Museum, I didn't really get much of a chance to go through. Granted, it's once again, I'm kind of jaded about some of these because the one in the Field Museum in Chicago is, in my view, probably the best natural history museum I've went to. And even the ROM is not too bad for that kind of thing. So I didn't really get through most of it. That day I had gone to Greenwich to see the Prime Meridian. So I really got there late in the day, and I only really had enough time to spend about an hour in both museums. So I wouldn't I can't really recommend the Natural History Museum because I didn't really see enough of it. The Tower of London is a 10 out of 10. It's probably the coolest castle I saw while I was there. The Tower of London is absolutely massive, and there's so much history there. It's been a royal residence ever since the time of the Normans. It's big. It's still actively being used, at least somewhat. There's the beefeaters and the yeomen who live there, like within the tower itself. That's kind of one of the things if you want to be a yeoman. I had a yeoman give us a tour, and it was amazing. The guy was 20-year veteran of the British Armed Forces, very politically incorrect, really funny. It's neat because you can see like the spot where various queens were beheaded. You get to see there's a room that's just full of the armor of the various kings. In particular, I really like James II's armor because he has this kind of cool munition armor, but has a very wide array of kind of unique stuff. I guess kind of another neat thing is there's a set of samurai armor from the Tokugawa shogunate that I think was given to the Tudors actually, which is interesting. It's not really a period you'd think where there'd be much interaction between the two countries, but Tower of London, gorgeous. I love Norman architecture. I like that it's white. It's beautiful. Also, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, the Tower of London is basically the Red Keep. The British Museum, another 10 out of 10 attraction. I gotta say, this is probably out of anything on my trip I was looking forward to the most. It'd been my dream to go there, especially to see the winged lions and kind of all the other ancient stuff there. And it exceeded my expectations. The British Museum is also free to go into, but it's absolutely incredible. Just all the stuff you can see there, the Rosetta Stones there. They have all these incredible statues of pharaohs, Assyrian stuff, coinage, weapons. It's just there's so much stuff there. I didn't even get to see it all. And I had set aside basically a whole day to go there, and I spent like 4.5 hours there. And I didn't see anything. They have these like massive walls of temples from like Assyria and stuff. And I just read this just listened to this big lecture series on ancient Assyria. So it was really cool to see all this stuff in real life. But I can't recommend the British Museum highly enough. It's amazing. It's got to be one of the best museums in the world. Now I had bought a London pass, so a lot of stuff on this list might be a little random, and that's just because it was included on my London pass. So it was I think like 200 something dollars, but it was unlimited entry into most attractions in London. Like you could go to any number in a day. So I added it up, and I probably spent like $600 because I went to a bunch of stuff I wouldn't normally go to. So the old operating museum is well, it's a little kind of annexed near the Globe Theater, and it's an old operating theater. So it's like a 19th, 18th century surgery. So there's like the I don't know, like an operating theater is like there's an operating table, and then there's like bleachers or like tiered seating for people can watch, and they just have a whole bunch of like little displays on aspects of medicine in that age, like herbs. They have some preserved organs, some old medical equipment. It's kind of interesting. If you're in the area and that kind of thing interests you, you might want to take a look at it. The Churchill War Rooms is something that was really played up to me, that this was going to be like the ultimate thing in London. And frankly, it was kind of passe. I only really went there because it was covered under my London pass. But if I was going to go back, I wouldn't go there, and I wouldn't really recommend it. The Churchill War Rooms is a bunker that was built under number 10 Downing Street during World War II for the purpose of using as an air raid shelter. And Churchill spent a lot of the war down there. Um, a lot of the war down there, running the country's war effort. So it's kind of cool, but it's nothing that interesting to me. I guess once again I'm kind of jaded because I've seen like the Defen bunker, and I've seen like a bunch of I've been on like a battleship and stuff, so maybe it's more exciting to other people. but it's like £30 or something. It's some really expensive amount of money to go into the Churchill War Rooms. It's like the same as what it costs to go to the Tower of London, and there's no comparison between the two. The Imperial War Museum is not a bad war museum. It covers basically from World War One on. There's a massive World War One display, probably the most extensive World War One display I've ever seen. Actually, probably the better thing in the Churchill War Rooms is the Churchill Museum, which is pretty fascinating. But kind of the obsession with Churchill, and I'll make a video about this at some point, kind of gets old fast when you're in London. So yeah, so the Imperial War Museum, it's just kind of what you'd expect from a military museum. Nothing special, but decently done. If you're in that part of town, I'd recommend seeing it. I don't think it's a must see, but once again, it's a free museum. I went to the Lifeguard Museum, which is by Nelson's Column. I forget the name of the building it's in, but the lifeguards are the royal guard of the family. So they're the protectors of the royal family. So they have a little museum. I wouldn't really recommend it. It's okay for what it is, but I only went there because it was covered under my London pass, and I was walking past it. The Tate Modern is an art gallery. I believe entrance is free to some of the exhibits. Like half of the thing are paid exhibits. I would not recommend going there. The only kind of cool thing about it was it used to be, I think it was a power plant. It was a power plant or a factory before they transformed it into an art gallery. And it's a pretty cool building. And if you go up into it, you get a pretty good view of London, of downtown London. But it just has the most like disgusting, lame, minimalist, postmodernist bullshit. It might be the worst art museum in terms of the art inside of it I've ever been to. It was just completely wretched. But it was the end of the day, and it was like the last museum open, and I was walking past it, so I figured, why not take a look inside? So I'm kind of glad I went in, but definitely don't skip anything else. So Tower Bridge. So people always get London Bridge and Tower Bridge mixed up. London Bridge is just a normal bridge, and Tower Bridge is the one with the towers on it, the fancy one everybody always looks at. So Tower Bridge is basically you go up into the tower and you get to walk back and forth. And there's like parts of it where there's a glass bottom so you can look down into the street below. And they have some educational stuff about the building of Tower Bridge. It's I forget what you call it when it's a bridge that folds up. So they have like you get to go in and see the engines, and they talk about how that used to function and stuff. And it's pretty neat. It's kind of a must do. Is it particularly overwhelming? Not really, but for what it is, it's not bad. I probably recommend doing it. It's kind of one of the iconic things of London, and it's right next to the Tower of London, so it's easy to go hit that while you're there. Now, the London Bridge experience was an unexpected gem. I was just only went there because once again it was on my London pass, but I definitely think it's worth paying to go to. So, London Bridge Experience has been voted the best horror attraction in London and one of the best horror attractions in the world. So it is a massive horror what'd you call it? Horror house? House of Horrors? Haunted house. Yeah, it's a massive like haunted house. And they have people in like like it starts off with people in period costumes, telling you a bit about the gruesome history of London Bridge, like when it collapsed and a bunch of people died. Interestingly, there used to be a church in the middle of London Bridge, which is pretty interesting. It used to be a lot more built up, but they tore most of the superstructure down because it kept burning. Um, so yeah, they had someone like dressed up as Budokai. They had some people from like the medieval era, from the Victorian era, etc. And as you're going through it, you hear some gruesome stories about like serial killers and that kind of thing. And as you go through, it's really dark. It's really creepy. There's periodically people who show up in like costume and try to scare you. And then you come to the catacombs, you come to the haunted house portion of it. And it is the most like batshit crazy thing. It's so dark in there that you have to put your hands on top on like the other person's shoulders in front of you. I elected to go first because I'm a Chad. But it's hard to describe. Just think of any like crazy horror movie, and that's basically what it's like. Like, you know, in horror movies where there's a thing where you're walking down the hall and there's like all the hands coming out of the walls and some of them grab you. There was that. You know, the thing where there's the flashing light and every time it flashes the person gets closer to you. They had that. They had a guy with a chainsaw. They had they had all these different horrors. I don't know if most of it really had anything to do with London, but it was incredible and it was long. The haunted house portion went on for like 15 minutes. I was expecting it to be much shorter, but they have a huge attraction in there. So I think that was great. I really liked that. That was cool. So next we have the Globe Theatre, which is very close to the London Bridge experience. The Globe Theatre was rebuilt. It was built in Shakespeare's time. It was the theater where all his plays were shown. And you can't really go in it normally, but I recommend a tour. The tours are really good. They tell you all about how it worked. Like, it was really fascinating. Like, because one of the things they told us was it was one penny to stand and two to sit. And they're talking about how poor sanitation was, and then the box seats were more expensive, and then the most expensive seats were above the stage, and you couldn't see or hear if you were above the stage. It was just a status thing. But it's kind of interesting because they were saying how, and I hadn't realized this, like plays were a really big thing back during the Tudor era. Like it was, I think they said something like 80% of London's adult population went to see at least one play a month. So it was a very, very common form of entertainment. And Shakespeare was just as like well regarded in his day as he is now. And it was just really fascinating. So yeah, I recommend going to the Globe. If you're there when Shakespeare is in, when they're during their season, you can watch something there. But it's really a neat building because it was built without power tools. It was built traditionally. I don't think I forget if they have a speaker system or not in it, but it's a fascinating building, and definitely one of kind of the interesting things about it. Harrods, for those of you who don't know, is probably one of the most upscale stores in the world. Maybe the most upscale outside of like Times Square or like Dubai or something. What's funny about Harrods is nothing in there has a price tag on it, aside from the cafeteria. I should have gotten something in the cafeteria because you could get like a scone for £2 or something, and just to get a receipt with Harrods on it. But like the few prices I did see, there was a £15,000, that is pounds money, bottle of wine. Clothing there is about £500. It's just fascinating to walk through and just to see the who's who of super expensive brands. It's an interesting thing. So then I paid to see the Phantom of the Opera West End production. That's where Phantom of the Opera is from. Well, obviously Andrew Lloyd Webber's from there. I don't know if he's originally from London, but he spent his whole life basically there. Phantom of the Opera opened there. It's been there for like 40 years now. And I figured I'm in the West End. This is like even more than Broadway, the iconic place to see musicals, to see shows. And I was either going to go see Les Mis or Phantom of the Opera. And I like Phantom of the Opera a bit more. So I went there. Ticket was I got a okay seat. I got like the theater is like 3 levels. So I got a center seat on the second level or something like that, and it was really good. So I paid about $100 Canadian for it, and I don't know if that's good or bad. I think for a West End production of Phantom of the Opera and a good seat, that's not bad at all, but it was worth every penny. Performance was amazing. They had all kinds of special effects. The chandelier like flied and the Phantom rode it. It was I was just amazed by like how advanced the stuff they had. The music was great. It was just an incredible performance. I'd recommend seeing Phantom of the Opera if you like it at all. If you go to London, let's see, London's Shard. The London Shard is that's kind of a thing now to put observation towers in cities. You have the Hancock Observatory in Chicago. You have the what are the other ones? There's the Hancock Observatory. There's the Sears Tower, I think it's called. In Chicago, there's the CN Tower. I forget what it's called in uh, New York, but most cities have one, and this is London's. I don't really recommend going up it unless it's part of your pass. It's not really worth the money. It's just kind of an overpriced tourist trap. And I don't know, I didn't find the panorama that breathtaking compared to some. I don't even know why Nelson's column's on here, but definitely go check it out when you're there. Nelson's column is a one of the most iconic things in London. Then we have the Bank of England, London Bridge, and Westminster. I didn't get to go inside any of these. I don't know like how you would even go inside Westminster. You probably have to like book tickets months in advance, and I just didn't bother to do that for whatever reason. I guess I just forgot about it. I didn't think you could even go in because of security concerns. But it was completely under construction. You couldn't see Big Ben. I couldn't even see the clock face on it. It's just covered in scaffolding. So it's kind of a complete waste. I couldn't even tell it was Westminster. It was so scaffolded up. So yeah. Wait a minute. I have Tower of London twice on this list. That's how much I liked it. Then we have the Westminster Abbey, which is across the street from Westminster, which is one of the most amazing places I've ever been. They have so many monarchs buried there. Well, not just monarchs, but we'll start with monarchs. They have Edward the First, Edward the Confessor, Henry the Seventh, Mary Tudor, Elizabeth Tudor. Actually, it's funny because Mary Tudor and Elizabeth Tudor are buried right next to one another. James the First, or James the Sixth, Charles the Second, William of Orange, Mary Queen of Scots. Let's see who else we have here. We have a number of prime ministers: Benjamin Disraeli, Clement Attlee, Neville Chamberlain. Let's see who else we have here. I think Cromwell was buried there, but they dug up his corpse. Isaac Newton, Stephen Hawking, Oscar Wilde, James Wolfe. Oh no, wait, they were buried elsewhere. They just had a memorial there. Let's see who else was buried there. Geoffrey Chaucer, Rudyard Kipling. They just have an immense number of famous people buried there, and it's worth going there just for that. I think there's like 10 prime ministers or something who was buried there. There's two very famous people who are not buried at Westminster Abbey, and that's because they're buried at St. Paul's. And I'm speaking, of course, of Horatio Nelson and the Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wesley. And if that's how you, I think that's how you pronounce it, whatever. But so yeah, Westminster Abbey, definitely worth a go through. It's one of the most unique churches I've ever seen because it was built in stages over a long period of time. There's little memorials that have been added everywhere. It's really kind of a fascinating compiling of architecture from different periods. So yeah, Westminster Abbey is great. Definitely recommend it. St. Paul's Cathedral is also beautiful. The crypts underneath it are really cool because, like I said, there's Nelson and Wellington's tombs are there, and they are massive in scale. So not a ton to say about St. Paul's, just a great cathedral. I'd recommend going there. So that concludes the London portion. That took up more time than I thought. So we're going to go through the rest of the cities, and I hope you enjoy them as much as this one. So expect more reviews to come.